The sheriff pounded on my front door at 3:07 a.m., the sound splitting the night like a hammer striking bone. I stumbled out of bed, heart racing, half convinced I was dreaming. But the flashing red and blue light spilling across my living room walls said otherwise. When I opened the door, he didn't speak, just handed me an envelope thick enough to feel dangerous. "You've been served," he muttered, then turned and walked away, leaving the smell of wet asphalt and trouble behind. By sunrise, my parents were standing across the street holding up their phones, recording me like I was some kind of criminal spectacle. My mother's voice, calm but venomous, carried through the morning chill. "He coerced Dad. He stole everything." My father added, "He'll pay for what he did." Neighbors peeked from their blinds, pretending not to watch while filming from the shadows. The whole street smelled of curiosity and judgment. The envelope trembled in my hand. Inside, a civil lawsuit alleging undue influence, elder abuse, and financial manipulation. Words meant to wound. I stood barefoot on the cold cement, reading how my own parents, my flesh and blood, had sworn under oath that I isolated my dying grandfather for personal gain. By the time the sun rose, the cul-de-sac was fully awake, gossip already circulating like wildfire through the neighborhood group chat. By noon, my bank app flashed an error, accounts frozen pending investigation. By 2, my boss forwarded me an HR notice about temporary suspension due to ongoing legal concerns. And by 4, the HOA president, who had never once waved at me, hand-delivered a letter citing community concerns regarding moral character. I read it twice, almost laughing at the absurdity. It felt like my entire life had been vacuum-sealed inside that envelope. The screenshots began surfacing online. Photos of me pushing Grandpa's wheelchair at the nursing home, smiling beside him. In the captions, those moments became something sinister. "Caught on camera, grandson pressuring dying man to sign documents." The world had rewritten me as a villain overnight. When did caring for someone become motive for exploitation? Grandpa's will had been read to me alone, just 2 days before he passed. His voice was raspy, but his mind was clear as the day he taught me to fish. He left me everything. The old bungalow on Hawthorne Lane, his battered blue F-150, and the part everyone seemed to pretend didn't exist, his investment portfolio, quietly compounding for 40 years. He looked me in the eye that day and said, "I didn't raise you to inherit money, Eli. I raised you to inherit responsibility." Then with a weak smile, he added, "There are things buried that only truth can dig up." I didn't understand what he meant then, but his eyes carried a warning I couldn't unsee. That night, long after the world decided I was guilty, I noticed something strange about the photo frame on my mantel. It was a picture of Grandpa and me at the lake, holding a fish we never actually caught. A silly memory, one of the good ones. But the back of the frame was sealed with layers of old electrician's tape, clumsy and rushed. I peeled it open and found a small thumb drive tucked behind the cardboard. In his crooked handwriting were the words, "If they ever turn on you." I froze. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. Whatever was on that drive wasn't just meant for me, it was meant for this exact moment. Grandpa had planned for betrayal. I called every lawyer I knew. Only one answered, a woman named Cora James, who agreed to meet me first thing Monday morning. Her voice was cool and calm, the kind of tone that made you believe in survival again. "Do not open that drive without me," she said. "If it contains what I think it does, you'll need protection before the truth sees daylight." I said okay, but I didn't tell her about the other thing I found, inside the clock on Grandpa's nightstand, hidden behind the pendulum. A tiny brass key, heavy and cold, with the word Hawthorne engraved twice on its surface, as if someone wanted to make sure it couldn't be mistaken. I didn't know what it opened, but I knew it mattered. As dusk fell, I sat on the edge of my bed, the envelope on the floor, the key in my palm, the thumb drive glowing under the lamplight like a fuse waiting to burn. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message read, "Don't walk into court without Hawthorne. They will bury you." I looked out the window. My parents' car was still parked across the street. Their silhouettes moved behind the windshield, 2 figures whispering in the dark. My stomach twisted. Hawthorne, my street name. My inheritance. My curse. I paced the room, heart hammering. The air felt thinner by the second, like the house itself knew something I didn't. Finally, I sat down at the desk, plugged in the thumb drive, and whispered, What did you do, Grandpa? The screen flickered once. Then a grainy video loaded. A dim kitchen, two figures sitting at the table. My mother and father, their faces lit by a single bulb, their voices low but clear. My mother leaned forward, whispering, "We'll call it the harvest. Once the papers are signed, he's gone and we take everything." My father smiled, cold and slow. He won't even see it coming. The sound of my own heartbeat filled the room. I stared at the screen, frozen between disbelief and rage. The walls around me seemed to breathe, like the whole house was listening. And for the first time, I realized Grandpa hadn't just left me an inheritance. He'd left me a war. The video was dated exactly 1 month before Grandpa died. My parents sat at the kitchen table, wine glasses half full, the cheap overhead light flickering above them like a dying conscience. My mother's voice, calm and clinical, sliced through, the static. "We need a doctor who'll write cognitive decline without overthinking it." My father tapped a pen against the tabletop in rhythm, replying with a smirk. "And a notary who doesn't ask questions. 2 signatures, 1 long afternoon, and then..." He leaned back, smiling like he'd already won. Harvest. The word lingered in the air like rot. Cora sat beside me, eyes locked on the screen. "We chain of custody this," she said finally. "We don't leak, we don't blink." Her tone was iron. "What about that word, Hawthorne?" She pointed to the sticky note where I had scrawled it down. "Hawthorne is my street," I said quietly, "but it's also stamped into this key." I held up the small brass key I'd found inside Grandpa's clock, engraved with the words, "Bank of Red Maple, Box 1027. We were waiting outside the bank when it opened. The clerk, a tired woman with polite suspicion in her eyes, rolled the safe deposit drawer out for us. The sound it made, metal sliding over metal, echoed like a coffin lid being opened. Inside was a brown envelope, a small black ledger, and a prepaid flip phone sealed in a Ziploc bag. My heart thudded when I saw the envelope. Grandpa's handwriting, sharp and deliberate, read, "If you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. Tell Judge Hart I kept my promise. E.M. Judge Hart, the name on the lawsuit summons, the very man presiding over my case." Cora's expression hardened. "Your grandfather and a sitting judge?" she murmured. "That's not nothing." She flipped open the ledger, running her finger down the columns. "These are payment records. Look, care coordination, transportation, consulting retainers." She turned the page, brow furrowing. "Cash withdrawals, campaign donations, fake home evaluations. Your parents' initials appear over and over. This wasn't random. It's a network." She reached for the phone. "Let's see what's on this." I powered it on. 2 saved voicemails. I pressed play. The first, my mother's voice, sharp and low. "When the notary gets there, don't let him talk to Dad alone. Keep him on the script." The second, my father, whispering like a man who thought the dark was listening. "Hawthorne is locked. After the harvest, we salt the earth." The silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at the phone like it was radioactive. Cora just whispered, "They weren't after the house. They were after something bigger." By the time we left the bank, the world outside already felt different. The air had that heavy, electric weight before a storm. That evening, my neighbor Carol, who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years, appeared on my doorstep with a casserole. "Just checking in," she said, smiling too wide. "Everyone's talking, you know. We don't want the neighborhood to change." Her eyes scanned the house behind me, like she was measuring how much it was worth. I thanked her, took the dish, and watched her linger on the driveway, texting before she got into her car. An hour later, a post appeared on the HOA Facebook group. "Safety alert. A resident is currently under investigation for elder abuse. Please keep your family safe and your doors locked." The comments flooded in immediately. Prayers for justice. I always had a bad feeling about him. He never waves. I read everyone until my chest went numb. They didn't need proof. They needed a villain, and I was perfect for the part. Then the final betrayal hit me where it hurt most. Dylan, my boyfriend, the man who'd promised to stick through the storm, he texted, "We should take a break until this is over. It's too much for my brand right now." A Venmo request followed seconds later for the coffee machine we shared. The screen blurred as I stared at it, realizing that love had an expiration date measured in headlines. That night, Cora called again. Her voice was tense. "We got their witness list." She hesitated, then continued. "Your mom found a geriatric specialist who never met your grandfather to testify he was mentally unfit when he wrote the will. And your HOA president's on it too. He's claiming you restricted access to your grandfather." I clenched my jaw. "I have Grandpa's home cameras," I said. "Come over." An hour later, we sat in the dim glow of my laptop as I scrolled through the footage. Grainy, time-stamped clips filled the screen. My parents trying the back door at midnight. My mother whispering, "Where's the spare key?" My father responding, "He moved it." Then another video, different day, different lighting. The funeral. The camera had caught something I'd never noticed before. A man standing at the edge of the cemetery crowd, dressed in black, face half hidden. My father shook his hand, quick and deliberate. Cora froze the frame. "Zoom in," she said. I did. The man's face was older, sharp, familiar from a place of authority. My stomach dropped. The ledger on the table beside us had his name too. Hart. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The house creaked. Outside, wind rattled the gutters like bones. Cora finally whispered, "You realize what this means? The judge on your case. He's part of it." I nodded slowly, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then Grandpa knew. That's why he left me the key. That's why he mentioned Hart in the letter. Cora closed the laptop. "Tomorrow," she said, "we go to court, but not to lose." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the faint reflection of the Hawthorne Street sign outside. The word no longer felt like home. It felt like a riddle carved into stone. When dawn finally broke, I put on my suit, grabbed the evidence, and drove to the courthouse. My parents were already there, smiling for reporters, holding hands like a perfect couple. The cameras flashed. Then, as I walked toward the defense table, something happened that silenced the entire room. The judge, Judge Hart himself, looked up from the bench, saw me, and slowly stood up. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and panic. Every whisper was a knife scraping along the air. Reporters filled the back row, pens twitching, cameras off but waiting. My parents sat across from me, calm as saints, dressed in matching gray, like two ghosts who had already rehearsed their innocence. I tried not to look at them. My pulse thudded so loud it almost drowned out the bailiff's voice as he called, "All rise!" When Judge Hart entered, everything shifted. He didn't sit. He froze mid-step, eyes locking on me like he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, the world tilted. The whispers began, low, electric, like static through dry grass. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stared, his face pale, mouth drawn tight as if a secret was clawing to get out. Then, in a voice that carried too much weight to be casual, he said, "Counsel, approach." Cora stood beside me, spine straight, confidence carved into her every move. My parents' attorney, a smug man in a Navy suit named Gerald Kincaid, sauntered forward like he owned the place. Hart's eyes flicked to the clerk. "Seal this sidebar," he ordered. The clerk switched on a white noise machine, the hum swallowing the gallery's murmurs. When Hart spoke again, his tone was low but fierce. "Ms. James, Mr. Kincaid, if either of you attempt to ambush this court with allegations that tie me to the decedent, I will hold you in contempt." His eyes cut toward me. "This proceeding will not become a circus." Cora didn't flinch. "Your Honor, we are not ambushing anyone. We have a sealed letter from the decedent, Edwin Mercer, addressed to you directly. It was discovered in a safe deposit box at the Bank of Red Maple." Hart's jaw tightened. The color drained from his face. "And you're certain it's genuine?" "Yes, Your Honor," Cora said. "We have chain of custody documentation. We didn't choose this courtroom. The case was assigned here by the clerk." Hart looked up at the ceiling, as if asking something silent above him for permission. When he finally met my eyes, something flickered there, a strange mix of recognition and dread. "Mr. Mercer," he said softly, "did your grandfather ever mention the word Hawthorne to you?" The name hit me like a heartbeat in my skull. "He lived there," I said carefully. "It's my street. He left behind a ledger and—" "A phone!" Hart's expression cracked just slightly. For a second, he didn't look like a judge. He looked like a man suffocating under the weight of something he'd buried for years. "We're going to take a brief recess," he said abruptly. "Counsel to chambers." The gavel struck once, and the courtroom dissolved into a storm of whispers. My parents watched me as I passed them, my mother's lips barely curving into a smile, my father's eyes hard and cold. It was the look of people who believed they were untouchable. Inside chambers, the tension was thick enough to taste. Hart motioned for the door to close and gestured to the letter. Cora slid it across the desk. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. He read in silence, eyes moving faster, breath quickening. By the time he finished, he looked 10 years older. He folded the letter carefully, then opened a drawer in his desk and retrieved a thin blue folder. The label on it was faded, the ink nearly gone, but I could still make out the letters. Elder Justice Task Force. Confidential. Hart spoke without looking at us. "Your grandfather and I worked together years ago on this task force," he said quietly. "We investigated elder exploitation cases, financial predators targeting the vulnerable. Edwin suspected there was a ring, a private network of families and professionals colluding to seize assets under the guise of care. He called it the harvest. He believed it reached into this courthouse." My stomach dropped. "Was he right?" Hart tapped the blue folder with one finger. "He was, and it cost him more than you'll ever know." Cora crossed her arms. "Then, with respect, Your Honor, you cannot preside over this case." Hart nodded slowly. "I know. But before I recuse, there's something I have to put on the record, and it can only be said from that bench." When we stepped back into the courtroom, the room fell silent. My parents turned, wearing matching masks of innocence. My mother's eyes glistened like a performer about to take her final bow. My father adjusted his cufflinks, gold, engraved, polished on gilt. Hart took the bench, face stern but steady. "This court has received sealed materials from the late Edwin Mercer," he announced. His voice carried through the room like thunder wrapped in silk. "In the interest of justice and under Rule 2.420, I am authorizing limited public disclosure." Kincaid jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. That's irregular and prejudicial." "Overruled," Hart cut in without even looking at him. The bailiff moved to the back of the courtroom. The lights dimmed. A screen lowered from the ceiling with a slow mechanical whine. For a few seconds, the only sound was the soft hum of the projector warming up. Then, grainy video flickered to life. Grandpa, sitting at his kitchen table, oxygen tube looped around his ears. The same old flannel shirt he always wore. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "If you're watching this," he said, staring straight into the camera, "my son and his wife are about to lie." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. My mother's jaw tightened. My father didn't move. Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "They think I don't know. They think they can bury me in paperwork and probate filings, but I kept records, real ones. The kind that can't be shredded." He lifted a folder into frame, the same blue one now sitting on the judge's desk. "And if you're hearing this, it means they've already started the harvest." The video froze on his face, stern, unyielding, alive in a way that cut through the silence like a blade. The lights came back on. Hart's voice broke the stillness. "We will proceed with evidence review," he said. "Effective immediately." I turned to look at my parents. My mother's hand twitched. My father's face had drained of color. The mask was cracking. For the first time, I wasn't the one on trial, and somewhere, deep down, I could almost feel Grandpa watching, waiting for me to finish what he started. The air inside the courtroom was so still it felt alive. Every breath, every heartbeat, every creak of the wooden benches vibrated through the silence as the video played on the projector. Grandpa sat there frozen in time, oxygen tube across his face, voice steady and unyielding. "Edwin Mercer," he said, his tone low and deliberate. "If I forget, the camera will remember." He lifted the blue folder in his hands, the same one Judge Hart had retrieved from his drawer, and continued, "I documented everything. For years. Every lie, every visit, every dollar that didn't smell like honesty. He began to speak names, one after another, each word a blow to the stillness in the room. He detailed how wellness checks were nothing more than opportunities to drain the accounts of the old and dying. How care plans became a cover for asset theft. He named the notary who'd visited under the pretense of friendship, but left with forged documents. The consultant who crafted the false reports of cognitive decline, using the same phrasing across 12 other victims. Copy, paste, sign, cash the check. Then came the final knife. He named my mother as the one who first used the phrase fast-track guardianship in a family email, and my father as the one who responded, "Once the papers are in, we lock him down." Gasps rippled through the gallery like waves. My mother didn't look at the screen. She stared at the jury box instead, smiling faintly, as if charm could rewrite evidence. My father, rigid and pale, gripped his pen so tight it might have snapped. Cora leaned closer to me, whispering, "He left you everything you need, Eli. This isn't just a defense. It's a confession they never saw coming." On screen, Grandpa leaned back, the faint hum of his oxygen filling the room. "I asked my grandson to install cameras," he said, his lips curving into a small, tired smile. "Told him it was to keep raccoons away. It was to keep an eye on the raccoons who wore cologne." The feed cut abruptly to time-stamped footage. Grainy black and white security clips that flickered like ghosts. My parents sneaking through drawers under flashlight beams, the notary accepting a thick envelope, the consultant pointing to documents spread across the kitchen table, the nurse turning her back, pretending not to see. Then the HOA president, Mr. Carver, appeared at the front door, whispering, "Some neighbors are concerned about the visitors at this address." A check slid across the table, and in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting, the ledger marked Carver, $2,000, compliance fee. Gasps grew louder. Carver sat in the back row now, face colorless, beads of sweat shining on his temple. Then the footage changed again. Grandpa looked straight into the camera, his voice soft but fierce. "To my grandson," he said, "this isn't about you keeping my money. It's about you keeping your name. They will stain it if you let them. Go to Hawthorne. Find Judge Hart. Tell him I kept my promise. He'll know what to do." The screen went black. Silence followed, thick, unbearable. You could almost hear everyone's heartbeat. Judge Hart exhaled slowly, then spoke, his voice grave and final. "On the court's motion," he said, "the plaintiff's petition for temporary control of the estate is hereby stayed." The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder trapped in oak. "We will proceed to hear evidence." Kincaid, my parents' attorney, leapt to his feet. "Your Honor, objection. This footage could be fabricated. Deepfake technology is rampant." Hart cut him off, eyes hard. "Sit down, Mr. Kincaid. This isn't YouTube. This is federal court." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. My mother's mask began to crack, her carefully rehearsed composure splintering into visible panic. Cora rose from her chair, calm as ever. "Your Honor," she said, "we also have supporting evidence. Cell tower data placing Mrs. Mercer at the notary's residence during the exact timestamp of the so-called home signing, and the notary's bank records show a $25,000 cash deposit the following morning." Carver, the HOA president, shifted in his seat, gripping the bench. His face was as pale as printer paper. Judge Hart gave a single nod. "Proceed." Cora began the next phase like a symphony conductor. "The defense calls Mr. Brian Fletcher, branch manager at Bank of Red Maple." A heavy-set man stepped up to the stand, clearly nervous. He confirmed everything. The safe deposit box belonged solely to Edwin Mercer. My parents were denied access multiple times. The day after the denial, my father attempted to close Grandpa's accounts for safety reasons, but the bank refused. Every move documented. Every transaction traced. Cora's rhythm was merciless. Then she paused and said, "One final exhibit, Your Honor." She held up an envelope and handed it to the bailiff. "A DNA report." The judge's brows rose. "Explain the relevance." "This report speaks directly to motive," Cora said. Her voice dropped into silence so sharp it cut. "Our client, Mr. Eli Mercer, is not the plaintiff's biological son. He is the decedent's biological grandson, through a private adoption arranged over 30 years ago. The plaintiffs concealed this fact to maintain control over the inheritance. Text messages recovered from their devices referenced the potential fallout. One reading, "If the DNA truth comes out, we're finished." The courtroom exploded in whispers. My head spun. I looked at Cora, unable to speak. My mother's face went rigid, color draining from her cheeks. My father's hand trembled against the table, his gold cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent light like they were mocking him. Judge Hart didn't move. He just stared at the DNA report, his eyes flicking between the page and my face. A strange look passed over him, shock, sadness, recognition. His throat worked as if swallowing a truth too heavy to say. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. The gallery stilled. Cameras clicked once, then stopped. His voice broke through the silence, low but firm. "On the record, I have something to say." Every heartbeat in that room froze. My mother's eyes darted up, panic rising. Cora's hand hovered near my arm, steadying me, and as Hart's gaze met mine, the world seemed to tilt. Whatever he was about to reveal wasn't just a twist. It was the secret the entire case had been orbiting since the beginning. The courtroom was so silent that I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, the faint whir of a distant ceiling fan, and the slow, measured breathing of every soul inside that room. Judge Hart didn't reach for the gavel this time. He didn't need to. His voice alone had the weight of law, grief, and unfinished truth. "On the record," he began, steady but low, 30 years ago, I signed an order sealing a private adoption at the request of Edwin Mercer and a terrified young woman who had been threatened by the man standing at that table. His eyes, gray, unflinching, found my father. I did it because the law allowed secrecy then. I thought I was protecting them. I have regretted that decision every day since. A murmur rippled through the courtroom like an earthquake held under glass. My throat tightened as the realization hit me. He was talking about me. My mother's face drained of color, her lips trembling as if her lies were crumbling beneath her tongue. My father, though, didn't move. He stared back at the judge, eyes sharp, cold, unrepentant. Judge Hart turned to me, his voice softening, cracking slightly under the weight of memory. "Mr. Mercer, you were never meant to be their shield. You were meant to be protected, not hunted." The sentence landed like a confession and a blessing all at once. From somewhere in the back, someone gasped. A chair scraped. A woman stifled a sob. Even the reporters stopped writing. The truth had finally punctured the courtroom's composure. Hart nodded to the bailiff. "Sheriff, step forward." His tone hardened again, shifting from confession to command. He lifted Grandpa's ledger with both hands, as though it were evidence and scripture at once. "By the authority vested in this court, and based on probable cause evident in this record," he said, "this court orders the immediate detention of Michael and Lila Mercer, pending referral to the state attorney's office for charges including conspiracy to commit elder exploitation, bribery, witness tampering, and fraud." The sound that followed was chaos wrapped in disbelief. My mother's attorney shot to his feet, shouting, "You can't!" Hart's hand rose, cutting through the noise like a blade. "I just did." His voice was final, immovable. "And I will be recusing myself from this civil case after today's ruling to preserve the integrity of these proceedings. But I will not," he paused, staring directly at my parents, "let a criminal ring operate in my courthouse another hour." The gallery ignited in whispers and hurried footsteps. Reporters scrambled for their phones, texting, recording. The HOA president, pale and sweating, tried to slip toward the exit, but a deputy blocked him with one raised hand. Dylan, my ex, stood at the back near the door, expression blank, phone raised to record, his live feed blinking red. Of course he was streaming it. My mother's voice cracked like glass. "You think this makes you better than us?" She spat across the aisle, her tone desperate, wild. "You think you'll walk out of here the hero?" But before I could answer, Hart's voice boomed again. "Enough, Mrs. Mercer. You've said enough for one lifetime." He turned back to me, his tone softening once more. "Your grandfather left you more than an inheritance, son. He left you a map out of a labyrinth he never should have been dragged into." He gestured toward the screen, where the final frame of Grandpa's video still glowed faintly, the old man's steady eyes frozen in defiance. "He made me promise one thing," Hart continued, "that when this day came, I would read something aloud." He opened the blue folder again and pulled out a single sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. "Give the house to my grandson," Hart read, his voice carrying across the chamber. Give the truck to whoever will haul the garden soil. Sell the portfolio. Fund a clinic with the proceeds. Carve into the front step the words, "This house does not harvest." The sentence hung in the air like a vow written in thunder. Nobody spoke. Even the clicking of cameras stopped. When the deputies moved in, I didn't look away. They cuffed my parents where they stood. My mother didn't fight it. She only smiled. The kind of smile people wear when they know drowning is easier than swimming. My father stared at me, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with hatred and something worse, fear. As they passed me, my mother leaned close enough for me to smell the perfume she always wore at funerals. "You think you won?" she whispered. I looked straight at her and said, "I didn't win." He did. Outside, the air was electric. Cameras flashed, microphones jabbed toward me, voices called my name, begging for statements. I said nothing. I climbed into Grandpa's battered F-150, the one the world had tried to take, and drove straight to Hawthorne Lane. Cora followed in her car, calling the state attorney's office, the press, the bar association, whoever needed to hear the story before anyone could rewrite it. The road blurred under the afternoon sun. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Still. Quiet. Waiting. On the porch, a package sat neatly by the door, a wooden box with my name etched into it. Inside was a chisel, a mason's hammer, and a note in Judge Hart's handwriting. He wanted you to finish it. By dusk, my hands were raw and trembling. The front step was coated in gray dust. Every strike of the chisel echoed through the empty yard, each word carving itself into permanence. This house does not harvest. When it was done, I sat back on the porch and let the sunset spill over the lawn, painting the house gold. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil, Grandpa's favorite cleaner. The windows caught the last of the light like they were exhaling peace. That's when I saw it. A folded note under a coaster on the porch table. The paper was old, creased, written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. "You are not what they said you are." The words hit harder than any verdict. My throat tightened, eyes burning. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like accusation. It felt like freedom. The house on Hawthorne Lane was quiet again, but not empty. Not cursed, just reborn. And as the sun disappeared behind the trees, I realized what Grandpa had really left me. Not money, not land, not revenge. He left me the truth, and a place where nothing and no one would ever be harvested again.